Road Dog here. This interview with Clint Howard, I have been working on it, try to get it for a little while. I was supposed to do it back February 20th, and I wasn't able to do it because of bad weather over in Burbank. But I flew to Michigan to a Comic Con that he was at. I enjoyed this interview very much. I had a good time at Comic Con. They give me the walk of the place. It was really cool. So I hope you enjoy this interview about Clint Howard, how weird he is, the things he does, all the movies he's done. So I hope you enjoy this. Sit back, watch it, and enjoy. Peace, love, dog out. Road Dog here. I'm sitting here with Clint Howard, man. I'm telling you, I've been after him a little bit to get this interview, and we just couldn't meet up. But I finally got it here in Monroe, Michigan, at the Comic Con, and it started on Friday the 13th. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. It did make me raise my eyebrow for a minute, thinking, Jesus, this is Friday the 13th. But all's well that ends well. It was Saturday the 14th, and tomorrow it's going to be Sunday the 15th, right, Road Dog?
Yep. Did you do good? I mean, was it all?
Listen, the people here in Michigan are great. We've been back, Kat and I and our daughter Rafi. We've been back here twice now. We were at Motor City Nightmares, and that was great last year, and felt like it was a good vibe. And we came back, and it was wonderful. The promoter Gary's a great dude, and certainly I like it up here. It's beautiful.
Yeah, Gary was great with me. I mean, he gave me my own pass for like the vendors where I could go around and do anything I wanted. I didn't have, I got to use the road dog treatment, which was cool. And you helped, because I told him I was there to interview you and Darren McCarty too. I'm friends with him. I've known Darren for years, but
I'll tell you what, Road Dog. What's really nice for us to come to these conventions, whether they be Comic Cons or whether they be, horror conventions, is we run into a lot of old friends, and then sure enough, we meet some new ones. There's good folks all over, and just as we tour around the country, it's great to run into people, and of course, acting colleagues that Peter Dante that I worked on in Waterboy. It was great to see him. I haven't seen him in years. And there's always actors that I run into. Henry Winkler from time to time, and it's just I get a kick out of that.
question, Night Shift. You were in that with Henry Winkler, right?
Yes, sir. Henry Winkler and Michael Keaton.
Yeah, I love that movie. That is so cool.
Yeah.
What they did and the horrors or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Just the whole thing was cool. That was a Ron movie, right?
Yeah, one of Ron's early directing movies, and it was one of the first movies where Ron and his partner Brian Grazer had teamed up to create Imagine Entertainment, and they made that movie. And that was based on a true story. Really? Some dude that worked at the morgue in New York City decided to run hookers out of the morgue, really using like the limousines and various things to do their work. And in fact, Lowell Gantz and Bob Lou Mandel wrote the script, and those guys ended up having a glorious career. They're still active. But they did Parenthood, and they did Splash, and they did A League of Their Own, and they did City Slickers. But these guys, they saw an article. They saw an article in a newspaper about somebody who worked at the morgue that got arrested, and they just thought it would be a great idea for a movie. And sure enough, they cooked up a great plot, and they found Michael Keaton. That was really Michael Keaton's coming out party as a Hollywood heavyweight.
That was a great movie. I like that's always been one of my favorites of his and Henry, you know.
Yeah,
And then I realized you were in it a couple years back, you know.
yeah.
Like when I met you in Lake Havasu, I told you that I was watching Courtship of Eddie's Father, that Ron's in, and I saw you, and I was like, is that Clint? You know. And do you remember that? Do you
No,
remember any? Because I know you were little, man.
I was 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
I don't have any memory of any of my acting until I was about 5.
So Andy Griffith.
No, I mean, I have memories of Andy. Andy and I grew close over the years, and especially later in his life. In fact, I was kind of responsible for getting him into the last film that he ever worked on, a movie called Play the Game. And of course, Andy was always close with Ron, and Andy was close with my dad, you know. And there was a bond that got created back in those early '60s when they were making the Andy Griffith Show.
Well, I know Rance. He was in so much like Bonanza and westerns and my dad. He was like, you know who that is? You know, he would test me. You know,
Yeah.
and he said, well, that's Ron Howard's dad, or you
Yeah.
know.
Well, my dad famously was in 2 episodes of Seinfeld. And in one episode, he played a hilarious character. He played a blind guy. And there was a funny comedy bit with my dad and Jason Alexander played George. And I believe dad didn't have he just had boxer shorts on because George didn't think it didn't matter that he didn't have any clothes on because he was naked.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my dad, what a lovely man, and he worked for a long time. He was a very early member of Screen Actors Guild because he got his Screen Actors Guild card doing industrials, which they're professional jobs, but they're not really designed to be on television. They're designed, in fact, he was doing industrials for the military. And he was 1,200. He was the 1,200th member of Screen Actors Guild. I was like the 1,500th member of Screen Actors Guild.
So when did he start? I mean, do you know what maybe his
Well,
first?
I'll tell you, my dad, Rance Howard, his first professional job was a movie. And while he was in the Air Force, he got this part to be in this movie called Frontier Woman. And technically speaking, my dad went AWOL to do it.
Yeah.
He left the base and did not return as scheduled because he was working on this movie. And my brother, who was a babe in arms at that time, he technically had his very first acting job, although he was unpaid and he was just basically an extra, and he was a crying extra because in this movie, Frontier Woman, they needed to have a crying baby. And they did the old horrible trick of give my brother, babe in arms, a toy, and then take it away from him. And when they took the toy away from Ronnie Howard, he started crying, and they cut, print, check the gate.
So was that his actually first?
My brother's first professional job, he was about 3 years old, and he got a part in a movie called The Journey, starring Yul Brynner and Deborah Carr. And it's a legitimate, Lee J. Cobb was in it, and there's some other actresses in it. And it was a movie about post-World War II. And they shot it in Vienna, Austria. So that was Ron's first job from there. And similar to me, my career is similar to Ron's in the respect of being discovered. Once the business finds out that there's a child out there who's got the aptitude to be in front of a camera, to not be gun shy, to not be scared, to not look right into the camera, because a lot of times kids will get to the set and they'll get so nervous they can't do anything but just stare right into that camera. So anyway, Ron was comfortable, as was I. When my first job was working on the Andy Griffith Show, and of course I have no memories of it.
Leon,
I played little Leon with Don Knotts. Most of my bits were with Don.
question real quick.
Yeah.
Who's the funniest comedian you worked with?
Oh God, the funniest comedian I've ever.
I didn't mean
worked
to
with.
interrupt you, but
No,
it
no.
just brought that to mind.
Listen, that's a great question. I wish I could really say that I did a lot of work with Don Knotts because I don't remember. I
Yeah.
see on film how brilliant he was. Listen, there's Road Dogg. There's been a lot of Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler's a really interesting
I had a
case.
feeling you were going to say it.
Here's the thing about Adam is when you're with him in life, he's not particularly funny. He doesn't try to be the class clown. He doesn't always try to tell a joke. He'd rather be sort of a leader. He's like a big brother. He's like, when you're around him, it's like he's your cousin or your uncle that you'd like to hang around with. But I'll tell you what, he does know how to tell a joke because he doesn't have to be funny, but when he needs to be funny, he just absolutely kills. And, listen, Adam is right at the top of the list. Listen, Michael Keaton, I know he's gone ahead and done a lot of serious movies, and he's, early in his career, he steered away from comedies. But Michael Keaton, and at Night Shift, Michael Keaton was really, really funny. I can still go back and recite dialogue of his, that he did in Night Shift. And of course, he was in Mr. Mom. And
Mr. Mom, that was great.
Yeah.
I like that one too.
So listen, Sandler's right there at the top. But of course, I've worked with a lot of funny guys. Jerry Seinfeld and Jason Alexander, both really funny. And there's a certain timing. When you're working with these comedy guys, you can just feel that their wheels are turning and they know right where to land. They know where the laugh is and they know how to land the joke. Because there is a skill to it.
Yeah.
There really is technically a skill. And Don Knotts, later on in his life, I had a wonderful opportunity to have a couple of good conversations regarding comedy with Don. And he explained to me one time, it was like a seminar, and it was a phone conversation. But Don was explaining to me the difference between character comedy and farcical comedy. Because when he was in Three's Company, it was a farce. It was like a bedroom farce. And he explained that when he was doing Mr. Furley was his name?
Yeah.
Mr. Furley, he would make sure that he leaned into the jokes. But when he's doing character comedy, like Barney may have been a broad human being, but Barney was a character, that he wouldn't lean into the jokes. And so that, I've always kept that in mind. The lesson that I learned from Don that day is something I always keep in mind when I identify, well, what kind of comedy are we doing? How do you make it work?
Okay, back to Leon.
Yeah.
I know I got you off that.
Listen, I don't have any memories. I've seen the episodes, and they're brilliant. And listen, the brilliance of the Andy Griffith Show was Andy and his idea that it's all about the material. It's all about the story. It's all about having characters that are honest and do honest things. And the Andy Griffith Show was all about the writing. In fact, they would work a month and do 4 or 5 episodes. And then Andy would take a break. They would stop. They would go on a short hiatus for a week or two while the writers and Andy and Don would work on the material. And they had, Sheldon Leonard and Aaron Rubin and Andy, and they had a couple of guys that worked as story editors. They were really brilliant. And I'll tell you, this is something that I've learned over the years, that my dad, in the first season of the Andy Griffith Show, and they were just getting started, and Ron was 7 years old. He wasn't even really reading. So, Dad would teach him his lines, but it's not like Ron could sit around a conference table and read the script. So they were doing a table reading, as that's what it's called. And Opie was getting laughs. But here's the thing. This is in the first season. The laughs that Opie was getting were bratty laughs. They were making Opie out to be a brat. And it was funny because on the Danny Thomas Show, which is where the Andy Griffith Show came from, was Danny Thomas, is that they had a character played by a guy named Rusty Hamer. Little kid, he was a kid at the time. And he was a brat. And he was funny. And he always had something sassy to say. He had a little one-liner to throw in at Danny. And that's the way they were writing Opie. Real sassy. And after a table reading, my dad raised his hand. Now, my dad at the time was 32 years old. And he was a hick. My dad hadn't had a lot of experience in the business. But my dad, he wasn't afraid. He raised his hand, and everybody said, okay, Rance, you have something? And my dad explained, he goes, the jokes that you're giving Ronnie to do, he can do them. And they're funny, but it's the wrong tone, because you can get the same kind of humor from an honest relationship between a father and a son. You don't need to be bratty, because the jokes may get a laugh for a little while, but pretty soon people are going to grow tired of Opie. And in fact, they broke for lunch, and Andy came up. Andy came up and talked to Dad and said, "You know, Rance, you're right. We don't want to make Opie bratty. We're going to work on making Opie, the relationship between Opie and Andy, real and honest, a lot like your relationship is with your son." So, boy, what a brilliant thing to say. How right my dad was, and how much friggin' balls it took.
Yeah.
For, in a room full of very successful people, for a man who didn't have too much experience to raise his hand and say, "Folks, I've got an idea."
You're wrong.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? One thing about my dad, nothing intimidated him. He wasn't a bully. He never felt like that he had to ball up his fists and be that kind of person. But he could be in a room full of very powerful people, and he would not be intimidated by them, nor would he be intoxicated by them. That's one thing about the business, and it sinks people, is success can be intoxicating. And when you put, I don't mean just like it makes you go and drink, but what it does is it gives you a false sense of security, like the way doing liquor does. Dad never had that. But I'll tell you, when somebody very powerful, like from one of these big agencies or a big studio or a movie star or somebody, comes up and puts their arm around you and tells you how great you are, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, it's like having a shot of tequila. It throws you off a little bit. Potentially, it throws you off.
So have you got a moment like that that really sticks in your mind of when somebody came up and complimented you, or
Not really.
no?
No, listen, I grew up as a Howard. I grew up watching my older brother do it. I mean, I was in such a beautiful position because, you know, not only did I have mom and dad who were absolutely just beautiful people. I mean, in retrospect, my God, what dad did and what mom did were so special. And then I had this wonderful, this example who was 5 years older than me. Ron and I never have had any competition. I mean, he's always, listen, when he was 12, I was 7. When he was 10, I was 5. There was no fighting. I knew he could always kick my ass. It wasn't until I got older that I thought, well, maybe I could take him. But I've had this great position of being able to watch. I've always had a wonderful chair at the fair.
So you never really had any with Ron. Is I guess what I'm digging at. You felt that you had to do better or nothing like that. You guys always got along, and I mean, I know kids will fight here or there
Yeah.
or whatever.
We fought over baseball cards and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, no competition. And I've always had pretty good self-esteem. I mean, listen, teenage years, I mean, everybody, listen, I was not immune to having an uncomfortable adolescence. I mean, I went through things with girls and went through things just trying to find my way, but it had nothing to do with being in the entertainment business. I mean, in retrospect, it was kind of weird because I was very insecure as a person, as a 14, 15-year-old human being. I was very insecure in a lot of areas when, in fact, with any stepping back and doing a frigging inventory of myself, it's like I shouldn't have been insecure, but I was. And I went through some trials and tribulations, regarding being a teenager and stuff, but again, it didn't have anything to do with being an actor. Acting's great. I love acting. The thing about acting is every day is different. There is not one day, even on a soap opera. I recently did a series of episodes of Bold and the Beautiful, and even though a soap opera, there is a certain regiment because you're going fast and you're barely learning the lines, and they're moving and they're shooting 35 or 40 pages a day. Still, each day is different. There's a different set of actors. There's a different set of dynamics. There's different material. And so there's never boredom as an actor. Listen, now as a character actor, I get to do some really great material. I get to play now I'm becoming a crusty old guy. I get to play crusty old guys.
Yeah, yeah.
I've played nuts. I've played crazies. I've played goofballs. Now I'm playing old.
You've been really good at that.
Yeah, I guess I can play. I can play goofy pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
I can play goofy pretty good, and also just God gave me kind of a face and a set of eyes to where I can be, I can be kind of nutty, crazy, in both a funny way and in a real way.
One of my favorite, The Water Boy, when you were there looking up at the window and what you had said about your own self, it was, I laughed so hard. Whose idea was that?
Well, Tim Herlihy was the guy that wrote the script along with Adam. I'm sure Adam sitting around had a lot to do with what everybody said. But listen, all of that material was on the page. I didn't improvise anything. I've improvised some stuff in my career that's been funny, and I took what they wrote and made it good. But listen, the material was right there. And how can you not do, I am not what you would call a handsome man. The good Lord chose not to bless me with charm, athletic ability, or a fully functional brain. I mean, listen, it's well written.
Yeah,
and
that was great.
People who watch entertainment, sometimes they get lost in the fact that what they're seeing is the final product, the actor delivering the material. But it started with an idea. It was written. It was developed. The director gives the actor notes. The actor uses the props, the wardrobe, the environment. It's a team effort. It is a team effort, right down to the music that they put behind the performance on screen. So, people get lost in the final results, but the fact is, it's a team effort.
Little Nicky. When I first watched it, I was like, who is that? And it was like, oh, hell no. But when I realized that was you doing that part, right? What was did you have a name? I mean, you really...
Well, they called me Nipples.
Nipples? Okay.
But that was a case. I'd been in Waterboy.
Yeah.
And they got a kick out of me, the Adam and Adam's people. And then I believe it was his very next picture. I got a call, and it was from my agent. I auditioned for Waterboy. For Little Nicky, I got a call, and they said they want to use you in this. He's making a big, goofy movie about the son of the devil. And I immediately said yes, because I had such a fun time working on Waterboy. And then I saw the material, and for a second, should I say yes on that? Because I'm playing a transvestite. But I embraced it, got to the set. The material was funny. The people that Adam surrounds himself with they're really funny, and getting to do that scene, and I still, one of my favorite lines that I've ever uttered is when he says, "Good luck with the nipple rubbing," and I say, "I don't need luck, I'm good." It's just,
That was great.
But again, the material, I didn't invent that dialogue. I played it, but I didn't invent it.
That's two of my favorite lines that you did do.
Yeah.
Let's go back, like when I was a kid. We were both kids. You're a couple years older than me. Gentle Ben.
Yeah?
Now, I know I've heard you say that bought your first house, and I love that show. I mean, I think I watched every one. I grew up with you on things like that.
Sure. Well, listen, Gentle Ben was a wonderful experience. First we did a movie called Gentle Giant.
Yep.
Starring Dennis Weaver and Vera Miles. And the little backstory about Dennis Weaver is Dennis Weaver, who had been Chester and Gunsmoke. Dennis Weaver introduced my mom and dad to each other back at the University of Oklahoma in 1951. Because Dennis was an upper division member of the drama department, and mom and dad were both, freshman and sophomore. And Dennis was running a scene study class as a senior. And he paired up my mom and dad in, here, do this scene. And sparks flew, and they became hot for each other, I guess. I don't know, it's hard to say. Your mom and dad became hot for each other.
Yeah.
So anyway, Dennis was in this movie, and I auditioned for the part of Mark in the movie Gentle Giant. Ivan Tors, who was a renowned producer. He had produced Sea Hunt, Daktari, and Flipper. And so it was really a cool thing. And I was going to I was going to go to Florida and play this character and have a pet bear and all these other animals. And what a wonderful adventure. Went down there with Dad, and we had a wonderful time. And while we were shooting the movie, Ivan Tors had already kind of, hatched the idea of making it a TV series. And in fact, I believe while we were shooting the movie, we got word that CBS had bought the idea from Ivan Tors and that we were going to do a TV series. Vera Miles did not want to be in a TV series, so they had to replace Vera Miles. And they did a casting session later on, and a woman named Beth Brickell, who God bless her, she's a great woman. She's still with us. She's in her mid-80s. She played my mother and Dennis Weaver's father. She played my mother and Dennis Weaver's wife. And we know her. We live pretty close to her, and she's a great lady. It had been freaking 45 years or something since I had seen her. I hadn't seen Beth since 1969. And then just back in 2021 or 2022, we hooked up, and it was awesome. So anyway, we did the movie, then we started doing the TV series, and for 2 seasons, Dad and I had such a wonderful time down in Florida. Dennis Weaver and my dad were always close, and my dad played a different role in the movie, and then for the TV series, they created this sidekick character for Dennis named Henry Boomhauer, and my dad slid over into the Henry Boomhauer role, and he wrote, I think, 5 episodes of the series over the course of 2 years, and it was just, we had a fun, creative time. And I'll tell you, it was when Ron was still working on the Andy Griffith Show, and Mom stayed back in Los Angeles with Ron, and Dad and I went down to Florida for several months to do Gentle Ben, and every 6 weeks or so, they would give Ron the week off, and him and Mom would fly down to Florida. It was in our contract that they would provide airfare and stuff. So Mom and Ron would fly down to Florida. They were both redheaded, and they would spend a week in Florida in the sun and get burnt to a crisp. And then Ron would come back and work on the Andy Griffith Show. So for a couple of years, the Howards it was a blast. And in fact, one season, the very first season of Gentle Ben, we came out of the box and we were doing great. We were up against Walt Disney, the Wonderful World of Disney, and we were beating them. And our ratings were rising and rising and rising. And there was 1 week with the Nielsen ratings where the Andy Griffith Show was #1 and Gentle Ben was #2.
Hey, I know I always had to watch it.
Yeah.
How was Bruno?
Bruno was great.
Was he?
Bruno was great. Buck was great. We actually had 3 bears.
Oh, okay.
We
I
had
didn't know that.
Bruno was the money bear. He was the star, basically. He was the bigger of the bears. And Buck was a little smaller, I think Buck may have been his son, but they weren't that much difference. But Buck was a little more agile. And then they had another bear named Drum that did all the water stuff. That, for whatever reason, Bruno didn't like going in the water.
Didn't want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, but they had this bear Drum that loved to go in the water. So anytime the bear had water stuff to do, you would see Drum. And once in a while, they had a guy in a bear suit. But it looked pretty bogus. And that's another thing about the series Gentle Ben is, Ivan Tors had a different idea of the series. And Dennis and my dad and me, but mostly Dennis and my dad, really believed that Gentle Ben ought to be an adventure show, a family adventure show, not silly, not stupid. In fact, there was one episode the first season where we saw the script and the bear actually had dialogue. He went that way. And, my dad and Dennis stopped what they were doing and had a conversation with the producers. Because that just wasn't, we don't want it to be silly. You want it to be real.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a great experience. Thanks for asking about Gentle Ben.
Oh, I told you, I grew up with you,
Yeah.
Watching that. And that was like one of my favorite shows as a kid,
Yeah.
And I know your mom, she had to step down from acting and kind of get in there to take care of you guys and
Well, my mom,
be there as a mom.
I'll tell you what, my mom was a beautiful, beautiful lady. And she ended up doing quite a bit of acting later on in her career. The last third of her life. She was an actress, and she was really proud. She married with children and all sorts of movies. Henry Winkler directed her in a movie, Smoky Mountain Christmas, with Dolly Parton, and that mom and dad worked together quite a bit as couples in shows. My mom worked enough, was in Screen Actors Guild after the age of like 55 to where she could get her own pension. And she was really proud of the fact that my mom, that she earned her own pension. But one thing about my mom, and this is something, show business is not for everybody.
Yeah.
When Ron was born, my mom was sort of glad to step away from trying to be an actress because she did not like the competition. My mom did not like the idea that she would go to an audition and maybe 1 out of 10 she might get. She didn't like the rejection. And it wasn't until later. In fact, my mom's first job coming back after she had an empty nest was working on Cocoon. My mom was anxious to start acting again, and Ron gave her the role as woman number 59 in Cocoon. She was sort of she had a speaking role, and she was way too young to be in an old folks home. But they put her in the back and they dressed her, and she wore a hat, and she always had white hair, and that was my mom's return to acting.
Cocoon?
And, yeah, it was Cocoon. And my mom's coup de grace, of course, was she played Grandma Lovell in Apollo 13. And if you remember the movie, Grandma Lovell had a dynamic couple of scenes, and she was an important part of the movie because she had some great lines like, are you scared? Because she's talking to her grandkids. She's talking to Jim Lovell's kids. And the little girl is scared and crying. And she's my mom playing this kind of old. Grandma Lovell was older than my mom. But are you scared? Don't be scared. Because if they could get a washing machine to fly, my Jimmy could land it.
Yeah.
And so, she was good.
That was her last movie, wasn't it?
No, I think she worked some more.
Did she work?
Yeah, that was 94, and Mom didn't fall ill and become. Yeah, it wasn't until 98 that she probably quit acting.
Apollo 13.
Yeah, Apollo 13 was shot in 1994.
But that wasn't her last one?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Mom passed right around 2000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. For some reason, I had in my head that was her last one.
No, she worked.
Do you have a favorite as far as movies that you were in?
Boy, Road Dogg, a favorite. Listen. Yes, Apollo 13. The quality of the movie, the end result. I mean, it's a brilliant movie. I watch it all the time. Whenever it's on, I'll stop and I'll watch it till it ends, or I have to go somewhere. It was so honest. Not a false beat in that movie. I was so proud of my brother and the process. I was a space kid. I loved the whole idea of the Apollo mission, and I know right where I was when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. Getting to go back 20 years later and pretend to be a NASA flight controller, a real people, and the vibe of that movie, the vibe of the production, it was so honest. We had technical advisors that were there. Dave Scott, the first astronaut to drive on the moon, he was one of our technical advisors. Jerry Griffin, Jerry Bostick. Jim Lovell was around a lot in pre-production. He wasn't around a lot when we were shooting. But Tom Hanks was like myself, a big fan of the space program. We're about the same age. And Tom was, completely enamored with space. And in fact, later on, Tom was responsible for that great HBO series From the Earth to the Moon, which really, showed in detail all the moon missions.
Yeah, that was a great series.
Yes, it was.
That, yeah.
It was a great series.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Apollo 13. But I also have to say, there's lots of other movies. Evil Speak was very fun for me. It was a real coming of age thing for me. I was the lead in the movie. I was 21 years old. I got embraced by the director and the cinematographer, Irv Goodenough. It was a fun experience at that level. Proud of the movie. That was a great experience. Doing that episode of Seinfeld was a great experience, although it was only a day. What a great day. But also working on Ice Cream Man. When this little horror movie that we shot in 93 or 94 was, kind kind of nutty and wacky and filled with a lot of kind of weird, twisted stuff. You know, we got plastic sunflowers and the dogs. Just a crazy, nutty movie. And I had a blast doing it. Developed a good relationship with the original director, Norman Apstein. And it has been with me all of my career. And fans, my wife, Kat, one of the first things she recognized, literally people on the street would stop me, or from across the street, they'd go, "Hey, Ice Cream Man!"
Yeah.
And she would say, "What is that?" And I go, "I got to show it to you."
That's one of them roles you just can't shake.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we can't, and to the point where it was about 2022, 2023, my wife Kat and I and Norman hatched this idea to do another Ice Cream Man, and in fact, we developed this. We developed the script. We've done a lot of work on it. The film has representatives in Hollywood, and we are preparing to make another Ice Cream Man.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting ready to ask you about, and I saw your jacket.
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. Let's see. I know this may not work because this is just a podcast, but I'm going to do this.
Okay.
And I'm going to show.
Turn around.
I'm going to show camera C.
There we go.
What? That's
Just stand up a little bit. There you go.
That's another Ice Cream Man, and we've had a tremendous amount of fun developing it. You know, developing a movie from scratch is its own kind of animal, and yet we're doing it, and it's fun. It's different. It's not. That's why we're calling it another Ice Cream Man, because it ain't the same character.
Yeah.
I'm playing. The only similarity is I got hired back in 1994 to play an Ice Cream Man, and now in this movie I'm playing an Ice Cream Man, and it's a whole different plot, a lot of great twists. I'm going to direct the movie, so it's going to be an opportunity for people to see. It's going to be an opportunity for people to. Oh no, we're okay. An opportunity for people to see what I can do as a director, and I like the horror genre. It'd be fun to take the turn there.
So when do you think we'll get to see it?
Well, we're gonna listen. We're gonna make it either here towards the tail end of 24, or certainly we've got to make it in early of 25. Like I said, we basically got the thing cast. We've done script readings. We really like our material. We've raised some money. We're still working on putting all the pieces together. We're going to shoot it in Los Angeles. Like I said, I wish I could tell you, Road Dogg, because we got a lot of great surprises. I could name off 2 or 3 people that are going to be in the movie where you would go, "Oh, that's great."
Yeah, sure.
So anyway,
I'll be an extra.
Yeah, well, it's Road Dogg. If you're around Los Angeles, we can't afford it.
Hey, I live in Bullhead City.
Well, there you go.
Arizona. I'm not far from you, all right? I was just in the movie not long ago. Then I'll wrap this up in a minute.
Cool.
Called Just for a Week.
Okay.
And it starred Chris Robinson, that was in General Hospital. Dr. Rick Weber, if you remember him. And it was a fun experience. I was the one that got all the bikers for the movie.
Okay.
And we roll in and we kick his son's butt and we roll out. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was a one-day shot.
As I'm looking at you here, Road Dogg, I think we could find a spot for it.
Oh man, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Oh, I'd love that. Man.
Cool.
So, I know you're tired, man. You just spent 2 days at the Comic-Con, and I cannot thank you enough for this interview.
Well, you're welcome, Road Dogg. I really appreciate it.
I've been kind of trying to get it. I saw the advertisement that you were going to be here, and I was like, wait.
That could work.
I got kids there. This is going to work. I'm going to go see the kids and then, set the interview. And that's why I sent you the message. Hey, can we maybe set this up?
You can quit talking about it because we did it.
We did it.
There you go.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
No problem. It's been a great interview.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Road Dogg here. This couldn't be any better. I love this. Clint's a great guy. And what more can I say? Peace and love. Dog out.
Dog out. I like it.
Yeah, dog out, man.